Today, I'm going to be demoing the Descope WorkOS migration skill. Using this skill, you can enable Claude Code or any other coding agent to seamlessly and accurately migrate your app from using WorkOS to Descope, both on a code level and a conceptual architectural level. I'm going to be working through an example of setting up the skill and running it on this Next.js sample app, which right now is powered by WorkOS, but we want to fully replace that with Descope. There are some different features, such as an authentication journey using either Magic Link or social login, the ability to select different organizations, and then once you're logged in, you can manage users, you can configure SSO, there's even an integration with Stripe where you can select either a basic, standard, or enterprise subscription. So let's see how easy it is to migrate fully from WorkOS to Descope for this sample app. So here I am in the backend of my app, and I already got Claude Code up and running. And to install the skill, all we're going to do is add the marketplace called Descope/skills. And then we're going to install the plugin called Descope-skills at Descope-skills. And then do reload plugin. And then to launch the migration, you can ask it in natural language in any way. Just say, I want to migrate this app to use Descope. Notice how you don't have to explicitly tell it to use the skill or that a skill exists. It figures out that there's a WorkOS to Descope migration skill, and it's going to start using the skill and follow the instructions that are listed there. So now it's going to begin its triage. So it's going to start looking through the code base, figuring out which features are in use, and then asking you some clarification questions. So as you can see here, it says it detected Next.js with the AuthKit SDK. Is that the full stack I should target? And say yes. We want to do a full cutover, so we don't want to do just, a partial or evaluation. We want to do a full migration. And then I do have some users and organizations that I want to migrate over. So we're going to select yes and then submit. So it's asking, beyond some of the features that it already detected, is there anything else that it needs to consider? So we do have that SSO configuration that you saw in the sample app. I'm going to select that. RBAC, so there is some roles that we need to migrate over. SSO setup, there was the admin portal, and we're going to migrate that over to the Descope SSO setup suite. And here it's asking if you already have access to the Descope console and a project ID and management key. And it's totally okay if you don't have anything set up in Descope. I'm going to select not yet, and it's going to fully walk me through how to use Descope console and how to set everything up. And now it's reading through the actual code base, seeing where the WorkOS SDKs are being used, how they're being used, so it can figure out how to transition all of those to Descope. Okay, it's offering to create a migration plan markdown document, so I'm going to say yes. So this migration plan is the first major deliverable of the migration skill. As you can see, it's a very thorough document, and it highlights in both technical and conceptual ways exactly what's changing and why. We begin with a broad overview. Migration at a glance gives you a highlight of how many files are going to change, exactly what the user impact is going to be, and the estimated engineering effort if you were going to perform this migration by hand. Then we can see how everything is changing and why. It's going to highlight how WorkOS is implementing everything today. AuthKit renders a login UI and runs the OAuth redirect cycle, how the middleware is implemented, the different user organization role and entitlement implementations, and then we're going to explore how that's going to transition over to Descope. So the login UI becomes Descope flows that we're going to embed through the Descope SDKs. We're going to perform session validation through Descope, transition over the middleware. WorkOS organizations are going to become Descope tenants. How we're going to handle RBAC, SSO, and so on. This is a breakdown of the SDKs. Descope has client SDKs and backend SDKs, and this is going to give you a breakdown of which WorkOS features are going to break down to the client SDK, which of those are going to break down to the backend SDK, how every single function call is going to get transitioned over into Descope. So from a technical viewpoint, this is a very, very thorough implementation model. Next, we're going to go into the code analysis. The skill instructs the LLM to thoroughly read through the code and find exactly where all the authentication touchpoints are happening. So for example, session handling, which files are taking care of it, how they're doing it, which functions they're calling, and how that's going to transition to Descope. The login, logout, same thing. Which files are handling that, which functions are handling that, and how Descope is going to handle it. And for every single part of the authentication process, we're going to have a similar description along with a complexity rating, if it's easy to implement or more difficult. Finally, this is the most conceptually rich part of the migration plan. It's going to highlight every single WorkOS feature in use and how it conceptually maps to its Descope equivalent. For example, WorkOS AuthKit becomes replaced with Descope flows along with server-side validation and configuring a JOT template, and we get an estimated time effort of the migration. WorkOS organizations become Descope tenants. WorkOS RBAC becomes Descope RBAC with roles and role names. However, the real value of this migration plan comes in analyzing the features which don't have a one-to-one equivalent. So for example, that Stripe integration with the different subscription tiers, WorkOS handles that through this entitlements array. In Descope, there's no equivalent idea of entitlements. However, using the skill, the LLM figured out a way to implement this in Descope using a tenant custom attribute, such as subscription tier, for example, and then we can just have it as a custom JOT claim that the code can parse out of the JOT. When you don't have these obvious or trivial one-to-one equivalents, the skill enables the LLM to figure out the best way to map that feature to Descope while preserving the functionality of the app. The user management capability is handled through the user management widget in Descope. The SSO configuration is handled through the SSO setup suite. Finally, we get to this checklist of configurations. As I mentioned before, it assumes that you don't have anything set up in Descope yet, and is going to give you a checklist of what you need to do and in what order. We also get a transition of environment variables. So in the .environment file, we have WorkOS environment variables right now, how to transition them over to Descope and which ones replace which ones up here. There's a section about user migration. Since I mentioned that I do want to migrate users and organizations over, it's going to explain to me how that process works and how I should go about doing it, again with a checklist. There's also a section about risks. Of course, any migration is going to have some inherent risk in it, and it highlights these main risks, for example, like this entitlement feature that we already discussed, and then the best way to mitigate that risk. And finally, we get this detailed execution plan, which walks you through the actual Descope console setup, the code changes, and then how to perform testing on your migration. And that's how easy it is to use the skill. Come back in part 2 to see the actual code changes happen and to find out how to leverage our new Descope MCP server to do the entire Descope console setup for you.